Hello, people. Welcome to the third episode of a year-long conversation. Today's theme is about Rubionomics versus Ted Cruz and Donald Trump's fearmongering, which is actually worse for the country. Okay, join us after the intro.
I've been looking for freedom. I've been looking so long. I've been looking for freedom. Still the search goes on. Oh, freedom. I've been looking so long. Still it can't be found.
Hello, friends. It's Brody from Alabama Liberal. Joining me in just a minute. It's going to be Blue and Alabama's Michael. Thanks for joining us for episode 3 in a year-long conversation. Today's main theme is going to be all about which is more dangerous for America, Ted Cruz and Trump's fear-mongering or Marco Rubio's fake optimism for America, the idea that anybody can be a millionaire. But first, we're going to start talking about the debates. There's been a Republican debate and a Democratic debate. Mike, did you catch those?
I did. I loved them. What can I say? I'm a sucker for a good debate.
Yeah. It had all the allure and charm of a crazy guy in Central Park screaming at pigeons and getting into an argument about with some guy about. I don't know. Like I was watching the Fox News debate, and it just. First of all, it was on Fox Business, the Fox Business Network, and it took an hour and a half to even get to a single economics question.
Right.
You know, it was all about.
It took an hour and a half to find the Fox Business channel.
That's pretty true. But it took an hour and a half to even find, or to even understand like what. You know, why it was on the business network. Right. And I don't know, because it really wasn't a business debate. And then when they finally got into it, Trump, he was talking about tariffs and different things like that, and the moderator was clearly not a finance guy. You lost me. I couldn't figure out what you meant about the tariffs.
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly not a finance guy, you know?
Right. The one interesting part about the debate, and the one part that they're actually talking about business, like the moderator is basically saying, well, I don't understand what you're talking about. Let's go back to guns and Obama taking our guns away.
Yeah. He looked really confused during the one legitimate business question. And I was just kind of, I don't know. You had Cruz versus Trump, and then they finally got into it. The big headline, I think, was that the bromance is over. I don't know that they ever liked each other. I think Cruz just didn't want to directly challenge Trump. But what struck me is that they finally went after Cruz for this, Canadian thing, and the whole authentic Southern persona that he puts on. And I think with Trump, Ted Cruz, he hit New York, and he made fun of New York, and he talked about how Trump's got New York values, and I think he thought that was a safe thing to do. Mike Huckabee's done it before, and they're always going after blue state values. San Francisco, and they roll their eyes. Or they'll talk about, New York or whoever. And I think he thought that was going to be a safe thing to do, but it wasn't. And there was a big backlash over it. The New York Daily Post, the cover of it was the Statue of Liberty giving Ted Cruz the finger. And it was they got really pissed off about it. And not only was it backfired, it's not even true. Trump pointed out that William F. Buckley is from Manhattan, but by the way, just something else he should have mentioned. So was Bill O'Reilly, was born in New York.
Exactly.
So was Ann Coulter was born in New York.
Yeah.
Sean Hannity was born in New York. The Fox News headquarters is in New York. Fox News and Fox News Business. So the very network that they were debating on, the headquarters is in New York. And Mike Huckabee had a show for several years filmed in New York. So not to mention Rudy Giuliani. you could go on and on about conservatives from New York. So I think maybe Trump just wasn't thinking on his feet or whatever, but he left out a whole list of people that he could have mentioned. And I don't know. You think this is really going to be a big deal for Ted Cruz?
Yeah. Well, it is so funny to think about, because it's like, when you talk about, New York ideals, and you think about the typical New Yorker is not Donald Trump. So,
yeah, thank God.
Yeah, I don't know what he was really thinking when he said it, because it's like, when you think about New Yorkers, you don't think of Donald Trump. Like, he doesn't, he's not the bar that you set, New York, ideals from.
Well, I think what's interesting, and I really want to get into this idea, that the Republican, the Republican Party, they're kind of setting up a party and an ideal Republican that they themselves would not fit into.
Yeah, they are.
But not only are they excluding a lot of people, they're excluding themselves. let me run through kind of what I'm talking about. Ted Cruz, obviously, they talked about it. His dad's Cuban. He was born in Canada. Marco Rubio, both his parents were Cuban. Bobby Jindal, they mentioned him. He would technically not be eligible to run for president under what they're talking about. John Kasich mentioned during the debate that his grandmother was Polish and barely spoke a word of English, so she wouldn't necessarily fit into that. Donald Trump, as they mentioned, his mother was born in Scotland. I mean, it kind of goes on, and there's not really, none of these candidates are traditional hillbilly, except for maybe Mike Huckabee. None of them are traditional hillbilly candidates or like redneck candidates or good, salt-of-the-earth, middle American people. Most of them don't come from that background, you know.
Right.
And so they're kind of setting up a party and an idealized Republican that they wouldn't fit into. They would be excluded from this, you know.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, you've kind of seen this growing over the past couple of years. I mean, since the Tea Party movement, you've seen them taking the party to a place that they normally wouldn't go, that they wouldn't want to go. But it's like the Tea Party kind of started that movement, and these candidates are just kind of continuing that push. Even though the Tea Party, I mean, you can say what you want, but I mean, the Tea Party to some extent has lost a lot of their political pull that they once had. They're not as popular as they were, but I guess you could call them the mainstream Republicans are still continuing that movement in the, you know, direction to the right. And it's crazy to see.
Yeah. Chris Christie, Italian immigrant background, governor of New Jersey right beside New York. I mean, when Ted Cruz called out New York, he was kind of talking about half the people. I mean, like, when he really was, you know, I mean, he was really talking about half the people on the stage. Maria Bartiromo, the co-moderator of the debate. I mean, it was excluding a lot of heavy hitters inside the Republican Party, and even somebody like Ted Cruz is not safe from New York because he gets a lot of. Right before that, they had talked about a Goldman Sachs loan. Goldman Sachs, of course, headquartered on Wall Street. So, Marco Rubio, and we'll get to the whole Cruz versus Rubio debate in a minute, but he pointed out after the debate, he said, well, Ted Cruz, he talks one way when he's in a room full of Goldman Sachs investors and he needs campaign cash because the whole scandal about his campaign financing was he didn't report $1 million loan from Goldman Sachs. Yeah. And so he'll talk one way in front of them, but then when he needs to be Texan or whatever. And I really thought Trump's response was going to be, what the fuck would a Canadian know about it? You know, like I thought he was going to suck it back to about his background again. He didn't, but he kind of talked about 9/11 or whatever, which is probably the first time Donald Trump's taken the high road. I mean, like, we should probably frame that, you know. The first time he's taken the high road. And then, of course, he went immediately back to it, talking about man and Muslims or Mexicans or what. I mean, he went immediately back to it. But it was interesting because for 6 months, really longer than that, New York City has been ashamed that Donald Trump, you know, they've been ashamed of this kid. Like, oh, my God, please, you know, get rid of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they've been really embarrassed to have him. But in that moment when he stood up for New York, it was sort of interesting how New Yorkers were taking his side. And they're not going to go for Trump. I mean, obviously long term or whatever, but it was kind of like, well, he is the son of the city again for just a minute, you know?
Yeah, just a minute. I mean, you know, for the clock's right twice a day. So every once in a while, Donald Trump would do something that'll make you proud, and then it's back to being Donald Trump.
Yeah. And I think, so one thing, I went back and listened to the first 2 podcasts, and it struck me out that we talked about everybody. I mean, even Lawrence Lessing on the Democratic side, who nobody ever talks to. You know, we talked about every single candidate except one. There's one candidate we didn't even mention, which is Rand Paul. He's easy to forget about, you know, and I think that the fact that he's the only one we didn't mention, that probably speaks a lot about his candidacy. But he was the only one who's not been in a debate from the last week. At the last minute, he and Fiorina, they were bumped down to the undercard debate because I guess they felt like Christie and Santorum by themselves would truly be pathetic.
Yeah.
And it was pretty pitiful anyway. If you saw the undercard debate, and I don't imagine anybody did who's listened to this, it was pitiful. I mean, it really was sad. But I mean, they bumped Rand and Fiorina down, and Rand Paul said, "I'm not coming. I'm a first-tier candidate, and if I can't get on that main debate stage, I'm going to take my ball and go home." You know, like he basically did. I mean, he didn't come to the debate. And during the main debate, there was a brief minute, maybe 10 seconds, where there was protesters screaming out, "We want Rand! we want
Yeah,
Rand, you know, and I didn't even hear what they said at the beginning. They had to rewind it. So I might be the first person who's ever hit the rewind button on, you know, the Fox Business. What did they say? Just so they don't know if they could hear that again. But they were screaming, "We want Rand," and I thought for just that briefest glimmer of moments, he was Ron Paul, you know, where it was like you had protests. A candidate, so it's just that brief moment he got in on some of his dad's action in terms of like the protest candidate, you know, and I kind of enjoyed that a little, I guess, as much as you can enjoy Rand Paul's absence, which actually is the best way to enjoy Rand Paul is when he's not there, you know, his absence. But I thought, what did you make of that?
Well, the thing is, like, I'm wondering how much of his whole protest, how much of it was more of a publicity stunt to try to gain attention and gain followers and, you know, just gain that publicity by saying that he's not going to appear on the lesser debate stage. And how much of it was more so he really just felt like he didn't belong there and belonged on the first tier. Because, you know, he actually, rather than being on the debate stage, he held a live chat on Twitter. And during
up, you know? Doing what anybody could do, like what we could do, you know?
Yeah. But, like, during the debate, like, of all the candidates, all the Republican candidates, or of all the presidential candidates, period, like, he was number one as far as candidates who gained the most followers. So I thought that was interesting. So I'm looking at it as...
and that will do him probably no good in the
primary. Exactly. And the funniest part is though, like they showed a list of the top five most followed people during the Republican debate, and like he was number one, and then like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton was like 3 and 4. It's like three of the five people who weren't even on the debate stage gained the most followers.
Well,
that tells you where the Republican Party is today.
Out of the people that's a great point. And I think out of the people on the main debate stage, you know, Trump is really the only one who's, I guess you could almost call Trump pretty good at social media. I mean, he's the kind of guy, you know, if you got a bad order at Subway, you call this a sandwich, fuck Subway, boycott them, and there'd be a boycott Subway hashtag or something, you know. But I mean, out of the other candidates, you could just imagine, I mean, hell, Jeb Bush, he didn't even know that an Apple Watch could talk or something. So, I mean, you could just imagine him on, point that clip out, by the way. Thank you. That was hilarious. Please tell me, for anybody who may not know about it, it was... Yes,
please go find it online.
Please
I'm sure
find it.
He's sitting in an interview with, do you remember who was in the interview with?
I think he's in like a conference room with his staff or something, and then his watch starts talking, and he goes, "It's not my phone."
And somebody's like, and like you can tell like something's vibrating, and he apparently hits the answer button. You can hear somebody like saying hello, and somebody that was in the room with him was like, "Is that your watch?" And Jeb was like, "No, my watch doesn't talk." And then
then in that moment, it finally hit me because it's been driving me nuts for weeks. Who does Jeb Bush look like? And it's a cartoon turtle. And that's really his main, like, that's who I would get to play him in a sketch, as a cartoon turtle. He lost all that weight. He's got those neck wrinkles, that loose neck skin. He looks like a turtle who just stuck his head up. He's the outside world, and immediately doesn't like it. Back in his shell, you get those huge Coke bottle glasses and everything. But I think, you know, we made some predictions for that debate in the second podcast. Everything you said came true, by the way.
Absolutely.
Fiorina would make fun of Hillary. She did. And every question in the undercard debate. And I mean, most people probably didn't watch the undercard debate, and I don't blame them at all for not watching it. But in the undercard debate, she was using the Christie playbook, because Christie so far is the only one to go to an undercard debate and then get back up on the main stage. So most people who get sent retired, pretty much the retirement home for the Republican. It's pretty much like the dead end of the Republican. I mean, Christie got down there, was like, "Oh God, Santorum, I don't like this," you know. And half the people, of course, during that debate he was on, they dropped out of the race. But he's like Orpheus looking for his wife in the underworld, and he immediately gets back up to where he wants to be. He didn't like the sewer, and he climbs back up. So Fiorina was like, well, he used every answer Hillary sucks, Hillary sucks, Hillary sucks. And that's her playbook anyway, so it kind of
exactly. So it's perfect for her.
And you were right that she would make fun of Hillary, and she would say Bill is a bad man, and all this stuff about their marriage. She did. First answer, they said, tell us about yourself. Well, my marriage is better than Bill and Hillary. And it's like, okay, I guess. At a certain point, it's just bragging, I guess. But and then you said that. You said Ben Carson would struggle to stay awake, and his very first answer. First 5 minutes, they asked him a question. He goes, thanks for giving me a question early on. I was going to have somebody to wake me up later. Tacit, backdoor admission that he sleeps through the fucking debates. I mean, he said it himself, And then we said that Jeb Bush and Donald Trump, they fall into a predictable dynamic. Jeb tries to start some shit, shuts it down. And that happened this time. Jeb was just like, I was third, then fifth, now sixth, and he's like, I gotta strike Donald, and you look at him and you think, yeah, because this has worked so well,
Yeah,
the strategy
exactly.
works so well of you attacking Donald and then him embarrassing the hell out of you.
It's like you start out third place, you attack Donald, then you're fourth place. You attack again, you're fifth place. You think you would learn, but then again, he is a Bush, so.
He is Bush. There's a learning curve that's just like a third war with Iraq. The first two, but they didn't go well. We're going to keep trying what doesn't work. I mean, Einstein's definition of insanity.
Fool me once. Shame on you. Shame on me. Fool me once. You won't fool me again.
Well, if you look at Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. By this, could we declare the Bush family clinically insane? I don't know. We'll let other people tell us that one. But I think people that are insane, and we got to get to the main focus of the debate. Ted Cruz, I don't think he's insane. I think he's calculated. Well, of course, in the undercard debate, he would have fit in just fine with Huckabee. Because Huckabee and Santorum, I can't listen to Santorum I can't listen to him talk about the problem that's real and then give a solution that would seem to make that problem worse. So, for example, he started off saying that, there's too many single moms in America. And now a lot of liberals, they may not like him saying that, but that may be true. He was basically saying that the single mom rate has tripled in the last 30 years. It's 11 times higher than it was in the 40s. He's basically saying that we get the highest, single mom rate in the Western world, the highest teen pregnancy rate in the Western world. All those things are true. And then that's why we have to ban abortion. It's like, the solutions, they don't sync up with the problems, and then so he'll say like environment's getting worse, burn more coal. I mean they just don't seem like the right kind of solutions for what he's talking about. So him and Huckabee, they pander to the conservative, to the far right social conservatives, and yet they don't seem to realize Ted Cruz has got that locked up.
Right,
and he's got that locked up. I guess the main focus of this podcast is, which is actually more dangerous to America, Ted Cruz and Trump's fear-mongering or Rubio's fake optimism. And we're going to kind of broaden that out because, I mean, people say, well, Trump and Ted Cruz, they're dangerous. They're making people afraid of immigrants and Muslims and everybody, every other thing. But Rubio, I don't know. This is a guy that we didn't talk about a lot in the first two podcasts because I knew we would get to him, and I think he's going to be around for a while. He's my pick probably to be the nominee. I think we'll get a lot of chances to talk about him, but I think that he, more than anybody, is kind of the heir to Reaganomics. This idea that the more money you give rich people, the more money that somehow magically winds up in lower class and middle class people, the more money they magically get.
Exactly. See, this is a tough question for me because
it is.
It's like, do you want to be, die by stabbing or die by hanging? That's
a good way to think about it because with Trump and Cruz's, with their fear mongering, the world's going to hell, and everything's getting worse, and you're doomed, and all this shit. And I think that paints a picture of America like it is a third world dump. You listen to Trump talk about America, and it's Tijuana,
Yeah, you really would.
Away from, it's just a shithole. But of course, that's all a tactic to present themselves as the cure. Of course, they present themselves as the cure to that.
Yeah.
Ted Cruz, even his cure doesn't sound appealing. The Because when Ted Cruz, I remember in the very first debate, he was like, he was basically like, well, America's been a big party for the last 7 years, and if you want a party guy, I'm not that guy. And I was like, well, what good are you? I mean, yeah, party. What's wrong with the party? And then he said, I'm not the party guy. I'm the guy that drives you home when you've had a few. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound creepy, Like, he's like the sober driver in a room full of drunks, Like, I don't know. And then he never used that line again because I think they probably polled it, tested it, and they're like, yeah, you sound like a huge fucking bummer, Ted. Like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
Not making them feel down. And Trump, I think, says America's awful, I'm the cure. And I think Ted Cruz is basically America's awful and it's awful. It's like there's no second act. It's like it's awful and it should be awful because it's God's punishment. And he doesn't really even the cures he presents, they don't sound appealing. He's like, we're all going to sit in a room and talk about how miserable we are. And it just, I don't know, It's very somber. It's a lot of his message. But with Rubio, it's more about, he's got that notorious, he said a lot of things. But kind of the big takeaway from a lot of his that's really revealing is America's not the haves and the have-nots. It's the haves and the soon-to-haves.
And the haves.
Yeah. And I think that does fit his candidacy, but I think that's a dangerous message. This idea that everybody is broke, they're just one day away from being rich. If they work harder, you go from a janitor to a millionaire. And I think that, it reminds me of last week we saw everybody losing their minds buying lottery tickets,
Yeah.
Everybody ran out, and what better metaphor for the lottery than like Reaganomics or what, So it's like, but with the lottery, people ran out and they bought all these lottery tickets. And you heard people say things like, well, here's what I'd spend that money on. And like they're already thinking about what their winnings would be.
Yeah.
On the lottery's main website, the top jack prize, your odds of winning that are, this is their own website, 1 to 290 million. Like 290 million is your odds of win. So the jackpot is scarcely bigger than your odds of winning it.
Yeah.
And that's the top prize. People go, well, I'd just be happy with $1 million. If you got all 5 of the winning numbers and no Powerball, you'd win $1 million. Those odds of that are 1 in 11 million. So they still suck. Basically, take away.
Yeah.
So your odds are 1 in 11 million for $1 million prize. Not great, But you go all the way down to the lowest prize, which is just getting a number, and the Powerball, or just the Powerball by itself, $4, which is double the ticket's $2. If you got the right Powerball, you double your money. The odds of that, 1 in 30.
Yeah.
So it sucks. It's just, these odds are bad. But when I went into the place, and I'm an idiot. I went out and bought a ticket like everybody else, and I don't know why, because your odds when the jackpot goes up, they're no better. And I went out and bought a ticket, and
if anything, they're worse.
Yeah, maybe. But something about the lure of $1 billion, it draws everybody thinking I'm lured into this. But I went to the 7-Eleven, and it looked like an auction house. There were people throwing money on the counter. There were people saying, the cashier behind the thing is like, how many tickets? And the people were in line, and they were saying this. And there was a line for people who wanted to buy shit at the 7-Eleven, which was almost nobody. Their hot dogs are from the 70s. Their food is fucking disgusting. You shouldn't ever buy anything there. The people who buy 7-Eleven sushi, they must be starving. They must really need a meal.
Yeah.
But there was a line for people who wanted to buy something, and there was a line for people just for the tickets. Well, the line for the tickets had 10 times as many people, as I'm sure you can imagine. There was just a cashier for that, and people were just throwing. A guy came in right behind me, and he goes, "I'll take 30 of them," and they go, "That'll be $60," and he goes, "Okay." So he's just like threw $60 at him, and I'm not trying to be like judgmental, but this looked like a guy who didn't have $60 to throw away.
Yeah.
He didn't look like a guy really who had that much, and so. But in the 5 minutes I was there buying a ticket, they must have made $200 selling these tickets. And I just thought, they know their odds suck. I knew my odds sucked. I knew they sucked.
Yeah.
And I went and bought it anyway, lost $2. And I was thinking, for all the fun of that was, I should have taken $2 and flushed it, because that was about the same amount of enjoyment.
Right.
But I don't know, do you see any parallels between the whole Reaganomics, Rubionomics, that whole system, and gambling?
Yeah, exactly. It's one and the same. Especially the guy you were talking about, well, he may not have $60 that he really should have been spending, but at the same time, he's in that mindset of, well, I'm not rich now, but
right. Yeah.
I
In his
will
mind,
be soon.
that's an investment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in his mind, that's an investment. And I've heard people, I know people, I'm not calling anybody out, but I know people who went out and they bought a lot of tickets, maybe $100 worth of tickets. I don't know exactly. They were kind of embarrassed to say, but they were like, well, two of my numbers they hit, so I got the Powerball, so I got $8 back. And I'm like, yeah, $8 out of 100 is not really like that's not really a great system, you know, like that's kind of awful.
Congratulations, and you're gonna use that $8 in gas to go cash it out.
Yeah, you've got $8 to wipe your tears when you think about how much money you lost last week, you know, like that's kind of a loud system. And I think that really fits in with like what Reaganomics, I think a lot of people don't even, especially younger people, they don't even really know what it is. And it's the economics that Republicans have been using since Reagan, 35 years ago. They've been using the system of, it's a pyramid scheme. It basically says if you give tax cuts to rich people, if they've got more money in their pockets, then they're going to use that to create more jobs, or they're going to spend more money, or they're going to, instead of giving it right to the middle class, who have been statistically proven over and over again to actually spend money, you know, lower class and middle class people, they will spend that money. Rich people, they've already got savings accounts, they've already saved all the money. To them, shifting 13% tax rate to a 10% tax rate, it doesn't really matter that much. It's just more money that they save, basically. And nobody in the history of corporate America has ever said, well, we really don't need to hire anybody, but we've got all these savings laying around. We might as well hire some people, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you hire people because your business is doing so well, you need to hire people, not because you get a surplus and you think, well, wouldn't it be fun just for shits and giggles to get a temp who's got a bunch of tattoos, get a couple of lively characters around here. Like, you don't hire people just because you can. You hire them because you need to.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason you don't need to under Reaganomics is because the middle class are not getting any new money, so they're not buying your products. Like the demand is not increasing at all. It's just that the people at the top have got more money that they can choose to spend. And of course, in a globalized economy, it's even more useless because if you give somebody like Trump an extra $1 million, hey, it would be fun to go to Barbados, and then how much of that money is American? None of it, you know. So in a globalized economy, it's even more of a useless system.
Exactly, because how does our economy work? Buy things, and if you're not making money, you can't buy anything. Yeah, like if you don't make the money, you can't buy anything. And if all the money is going to the top, they have no incentive. There is zero incentive for them to create jobs when they're running their company and they're making their profits. And, they're operating at a margin where they're making a lot of wealth. Where's the incentive for them to create jobs? They're not going to say, oh, well, let me just hire 1,000 people that could drop cut into my cost or my profit. They're not going to do that. So they're just going to pocket all of that money and put it in some offshore account and screw America. Whatever.
I've seen conservative financial reporters, they asked Mark Cuban, they were interviewing him, and I think they thought, well, he'll give us the answer we want. Yeah. Because Mark Cuban is not really, he's not a total conservative, but he's not really a liberal either. I think you said he's a libertarian before in interviews, so I'm not mistaken, but he's not really, he's not a liberal, really. Not really. And so I think they thought, well, he'll give us the answer we want. And they said, so you're going to get a tax cut. This must be exciting. How many new jobs are you get? He goes, how much do taxes impact your hiring practices? And he said, none. Zero. None. And they immediately went on to something else because I don't think they wanted to argue with him. Yeah. But this is a lot of people who really have companies and this is kind of what they say. Some of them think taxes are too high, but even if you gave them a tax cut, if the demand is not there and people are not buying their product, there's no need to hire anybody else, and they're just going to pocket that tax cut and put it into something else. It doesn't lead. They've studied this over and over again, and what they've actually studied is states who use Reaganomics. I don't want to make this too boring for people, because economics sometimes people's eyes glaze over, especially liberals, which is why like a lot of times they don't, they don't really follow this stuff very well, which is why Republicans get away with murder on the economic front. But basically, they've studied it to where not only when states cut their budgets, because what they've had to, because tax cuts have got to come from somewhere. If you give a tax cut to a corporation or whoever, that money's got to come from somewhere else. So just to pay for those those tax cuts, not only do those companies not create more jobs, you're losing jobs because you have to cut government jobs to pay for those cuts. So they lay you off, or whoever, teachers, firefighters, firemen, they lay them off and shift that money to a tax cut so that McDonald's can sit on the surplus and not hire. I call them make jobs. If you have to lay off 100 government workers to get 20 new McDonald's employees, is that really worth it? And I think most people would say no.
Right. And see, that's what, when I talk about this, or when I attempt to talk about this with people, it's like, they don't understand. Like, even if tax rates are high, if the demand is still there, and there's still, you're a CEO and you're operating at a low cost, even with high taxes, and you're still turning a profit, you're going to keep operating. I mean, there has to be a demand. And that demand has to come from people spending money.
The people you just let off. I think sometimes people think about the economy as like an island, and it's really a huge spider web.
Yeah.
And if you cut one strand, when they outsource, 100 people say, well, liberals, why are they so uptight about outsourcing? And especially people like us, Alabama liberals, we're a lot more aggressive about outsourcing than some of the liberals on the coast might be, because we know that it weakens the entire economy. Also call that offshoring. Some people, they want to call it offshoring or whatever, but like you lay off 100 workers, you take those jobs and you cut those and you shift those to China. Those are 100 people. Like, let's say you had a toothpaste company and you made toothpaste. Well, when you lay off that factory and you move it somewhere else, it could be anywhere. I don't want to single out China. It could be anywhere, but you move it somewhere else. Those 100 jobs, those are 100 people who are not in the economy able to buy toothpaste anymore. I mean, they might, but they're not buying it like they were. They're saving. So you're really killing your own company in a roundabout way when you're doing this, because the more jobs you're offshoring, those are customers that used to also buy your product, and now they're having to save because they're out of work or whatever. So it's slowly, eroding the wages that people, they say. Now the unemployment rate's down, and that's great, but people are, a lot of times, their wages are stagnant. What that means is they may not buy a second car or a new PlayStation or a new iPhone, or go out to an Applebee's, or go to a movie or whatever. And this is the stuff the economy really runs on. So,
right. And if you want to use I was going to say, if you want to use a more specific example to Alabama, you could look at Fort Payne. Since this is Alabama liberal and blue in Alabama, you could look at Fort Payne, Alabama.
Barely. You're right though. I mean, there was a lot of sock mills, and they got sent to Mexico, and it turned the thriving textile industry into nothing. People have to be re-educated. But I mean, when you look at like what's more dangerous, I guess we kind of have to look at like why people say, why is it so dangerous to be wildly optimistic about America? How could that possibly be dangerous if Cruz and Trump, if they're too pessimistic, why does it hurt Rubio to be too optimistic? I think it really has to do with the fact that people, if they really believe that they're not going to be in a job for a very long time, they kind of don't care what happens to it. So for example, you have school teachers and they think that, well, I don't care if they cut my pension. I don't care if they cut my benefits. I don't care if they cut my wages, because I'm going to win American Idol. If they're not invested long term in those jobs, then you can kind of screw them over a lot.
Exactly.
And I think that that's what's happening. And people, and they use it with minimum wage when they say things like, "Well, minimum wage, that's a starting job." Not anymore. And maybe it used to be, right? It used to be, but not anymore. And now there's a lot of adults on minimum wage. A lot of jobs, several of the contractor jobs or whatever that like I've taken, they pay minimum wage. It's created a cycle where now when you ask somebody out of college, do a free internship, take a job for nothing, the money will come. They believe it because they're in this jackpot mentality, instead of saying, well, maybe it's not right that I'm working for free at 30 years old, or maybe it's not right that I'm working 40 hours a week at Walmart and I'm eligible for food stamps, or maybe it's not. But because they're invested in this idea that they're going to be rich doing something else, they don't really care about the jobs they're in, and the jobs they're in, a lot of times, maybe they don't think about it that way, but they're jobs they will be in.
Yeah, exactly. You literally hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah. But I just, when you look at these slimy shitheels, I mean, Rubio and Cruz, for a while when they were going back and forth, it seemed like they were in a who can be the biggest the oiliest bastard in the room. I mean, they really seemed like, I don't know, they were competing in a way, and they've said Rubio, I mean, there's a story out that he bought a gun on Christmas Eve, and it's to defend his family from ISIS. You know, This is their last line of defense. You know, and I hope that's not true, because that means we're really screwed if it comes down to Rubio's target practice. And so I don't know. So it feels like now his fake optimism is shifting. Now he's seeing the Trump Cruz fear-mongering, and he's shifting that into that with ISIS 24/7. And it was a little disgusting to see him. They asked him about, like amnesty or immigration and his path to citizenship, and it was kind of disgusting to watch him drop that like a dirty diaper and walk away from him. And he did have that position, and now he's totally, because that was before ISIS, and I'm like, well, that's before America was under attack. I mean, they make it sound like ISIS is camped out in the Walmart parking lot just waiting to, I mean, they make it sound like we really are on the endangered species list, and I'm like, what's changed? There was ISIS. Before there was ISIS, there was Al-Qaeda. Before that, Hezbollah. I mean, these groups have been around for 30 years. Nothing's changed.
Exactly.
And I don't know. I guess he just realizes that
poll numbers have changed. That's what's changed.
Yeah, poll numbers have changed. But path to citizenship is all of a sudden become a toxic position for a Republican to take, and I, all of them that used to back it, Chris Christie, I mean, they've all backed away from it.
Yeah, they have.
And they had, during the debate, it was interesting that they had an attack ad on Rubio, and it had him as a weather vane, which, as you pointed out, is clearly targeted towards old people because only they know what a weather vane is. Exactly. And it was like, but they had him as a weather vane, and he was spinning everywhere the wind goes. Rubio was for immigration before he was against it. Now he's against it. Now he's for it. And they had it back and forth. And the ad was sponsored by Jeb Bush, who's done virtually the same damn thing. And then it said, Jeb Bush, you always know where he stands. And I'm like, actually, I don't know where he stands on immigration. I mean, it was sort of like an intentionally funny ad.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that pretty much sums up Jeb Bush's candidacy as a whole.
Unintentionally hilarious, yeah. But Jeb, you know where he stands, and I'm like, that's one of many positions where I don't know that it's been like, my position on this is clear as mud. We all know it. Barely changed at all, you know. It's like, so it was also interesting to note, because we just had a Democratic debate a couple days ago, and it was interesting to note the difference in the ad, you know, because the ads for the Republican debate, it was a bunch of shitty companies, like, actively making America worse. Like oil companies, coal companies, Michael Bay movies, I mean, the triumvirate of evil, you know, and they had gold coin salesmen. They're trying to sell gold coins to nutters who think the dollar's about to collapse. So once again, hitting on that fear-based model, but it was like, you know, the dollar could collapse any day. Buy your gold coins. It made me think, it's for paranoid people about the dollar. If you're over 60, you buy gold coins. If you're under 40, you buy Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. Which I mean, I'm under 40, and I'm still not quite sure I understand Bitcoin, but
that's well, the thing about Bitcoin is, if the economy collapses, a virtual currency will really be useless. You know, there will really be no need for a virtual currency. But I think something else too, when you talk about you don't exactly know how it works. They started it after the meltdown, saying, "Well, the Federal Reserve, they're gonna." I mean, it's a new age way to present the age-old Ron Paul, hate the Federal Reserve, gold standard, you know, like all that rhetoric, and kind of to present that. And it's a new way to spiff that up and make that look more current or whatever. But it still goes back to this idea that the Federal Reserve's printing money, and in 2008, the economy got sunk by a bunch of complicated financial derivatives that nobody understood. And it was like...
And we will not try to explain that to you guys, because that will
that would. Go watch The Big Short. He'll probably do a better job anyway. But there's celebrities in it too. You can, so it's better. But with the financial derivatives, nobody understood how Bitcoin, nobody understood how they worked, and it sunk the economy. And they're like, okay, here comes Bitcoin, an even more complicated financial system. It's going to save us from the thing you didn't understand by not being able to understand this one. And I'm like, in both cases, the cure is something that we don't understand either. And I'm like, once again, the cure seems like a symptom of the disease, like a lot of the Republican Party platforms.
Mm-hmm. Well, so kind of back on the main topic, like kind of the flip side of Rubio's kind of false optimism, I think Trump and Cruz pulling off this whole terror, this constant fear mongering. I don't know. I would almost lead and say that's a little worse, because I think that's doing, when you look at where the country is today, it's dividing the country even more. It's making people even more fearful of anybody that is remotely looks different. I mean, you see people starting these stupid militia groups. You saw what happened with
we talked about a minute ago, Rubio buying a gun on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
I mean, what's next? Is Trump going to literally join a border militia? Is he going to be out there on a launcher? I mean, like they keep upping the ante on how afraid to make people. Well, bringing it back to Alabama just briefly. I mean, we saw Alabama win another national championship last week. They won the national championship. They've won, I don't know, 300 or something like that. I mean, it's really more than any other school. And they've kind of become the New York Yankees of college football.
Yeah, they have.
In a way that they win almost every year. And actually, I posted the very first podcast the day of the national championship, hoping we'd get some of the some people like looking for Alabama football, and then they see that and they get it and they listen to it for 5 minutes and like, wait a minute, this isn't sports radio, What this is?
Where's Paul Feinbaum at?
But they keep saying that Alabama win all these national championships. I mean, and I'm going to tie this into Rubionomics and the lottery and all this stuff. They keep saying Alabama winning these national championships is going to be a good thing for the state. And my question is, when?
Right.
I mean, like what? Like, it's been about 10 years that Alabama's been really good at football. And if they don't go to the national championship, Auburn does, usually.
Yeah.
And these both two schools in Alabama, and they keep winning or coming in second place or whatever. And to me, it doesn't seem to have made any difference.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Or even the economies of Tuscaloosa and Auburn, the schools, the cities that host these schools. So
yeah, I mean, you may see a spike in a couple of sporting goods stores the day after a championship to buy the championship T-shirts, but as far as the economy as a whole, no, you really don't see it. I mean, it's non-existent.
With the schools, I mean, it's just, I think people keep saying that it's going to make a big difference, and I think that they're putting Alabama football is a religion, right?
Yeah.
So, it's a really, really big thing. It's college sports, and so that they don't have any pro teams, and a lot of times, a lot of the money that gets generated from this, it might go to the college, but it doesn't even necessarily help the area around it. Alabama is based in Tuscaloosa, which is not the best city in terms of like economic growth and prosperity and things like that. Nothing against Tuscaloosa; it's a great city, but it's not. They've done better, and I think like this idea that football is going to save the state somehow economically, it's just not happening.
No,
and in a lot of ways, it might cost the city of Tuscaloosa to keep building these new things. I mean, most of the pro teams when I don't think. In a lot of cities that have pro teams, they're subsidized by the taxpayers when they build a stadium.
Yeah.
So the owner of the team, they might pay a few $100 million, and then the city pays a lot more than that. And if they don't like it, they threaten to move, usually to LA.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know what I don't know what they're going to do now that LA has a team. But I think just to tie it all together, people they might buy a lottery ticket and think that that's going to save them, or they might think football is going to save Alabama. Actually, Alabama is one of the very few states that does not sell lottery tickets.
Right.
And they should actually. I mean, as much as I think that lottery is a waste of money, I mean, if people want to waste their money, that should go to the state, and not all the states around it. Every other state that doesn't have a lottery is either Nevada or Mississippi has Tunica and Biloxi, these casino towns. Nevada obviously has got casino towns, so they have some type of legalized gambling that makes sense not to have a lottery. Alabama and Arkansas are really the only states that don't have a lottery or any reason not to, and they don't really have any. They're not states that can really afford to turn their back on $1 billion.
Yeah.
They need that money. So I don't.
And I saw an article they had interviewed a cashier at a convenience store just over the Alabama-Georgia state line, and she was saying that literally about 75% of the tickets that she sold, lottery tickets, were to Alabama residents. So, I mean, we need a lottery. Our people want a lottery. So, like, what's the holdup? Well, never mind. Look at who runs our state. So
yeah. And let's keep in mind that the last governor who put it up to a vote, Don Siegelman, is now sitting in a jail cell
Yeah,
in Louisiana.
exactly.
The least corrupt Alabama governor in the last 50 years is the only one who's went to jail. And the other ones that, he's the only one who went to jail, and it was pretty much over the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that when he tried to pass the lottery, the biggest campaigner against it was the state of Georgia. They spent millions of dollars trying to get the people of Alabama not to vote on it. Because you're right, they sold a lot of tickets to Georgia. But I don't know. I mean, just to close it out, I would say that if we had to really come down and say which is worse, Cruz's fearmongering and Rubionomics, I think you might say Cruz's fearmongering. I might say Rubionomics. I don't know. It's kind of a toss-up.
It is. I'd be interesting to hear what the listeners have to say.
I would too, and maybe they'll sound off in the comments. That would be great. I look forward to hearing that. And these and other important questions we'll get to the bottom of next time. Michael, what's your web address?
You can find me at blueinalabama.wordpress.com.
Yep, and as always, Alabama Liberal for me. All right, thank you for listening, everybody.